Okay, welcome back everyone for the last talk. It is my pleasure to introduce Tillo Detige. Tillo obtained a master's in fine arts from the School of Arts, Ghent, in 2003, and a master's in Eastern languages and cultures, that is Indology, from Ghent University in 2009. After working for some time as an interpreter for Hindi, as a language instructor, and as a teacher of integration courses, he received an ICCR scholarship to continue studies of Hindi at the Kendriya Hindi Sansthan in Delhi. And then he started his PhD research at Ghent in September 2012 under the supervision of Professor Eva de Klerk and aided by a scholarship grant by the Research Foundation Flanders. He's working on late medieval and early modern Digambara Jainism, focusing on the Bhaṭṭārakas of Western India. During his extensive fieldwork, he looks at both manuscript and epigraphic sources, and he has found developing an acquaintance with contemporary Digambara Jainism useful for a comparative perspective and an improved understanding of the historical sources. So I think if we go by the abstract we are in for a very fine talk. So I look forward. Thank you.
I suppose even the last paper of a conference can still go with a very small Mangalacharan. So in that sense, Om Namo Siddhebhya. Apart from being the last presenter, I am also, I guess, the youngest and certainly the most junior of all presenters, so that means I owe a double thanks to all the organizers for the invitation and for the opportunity to present something. Thank you very much. What I'm presenting here today is, what I'm reporting on is my ongoing doctoral research at Ghent University. I'm just finishing a 3-month fieldwork visit to India. What that translates into today is a whole lot of raw material rather than a written out paper ready for publication. So that will translate into a lot of photographs also. And that works out very well with a huge screen, the biggest screen I've ever seen in a conference, I think. Now, as a way of introducing the subject of not only this paper, but of my PhD research, I don't always have the luck of having had a Bhaṭṭārakas right here, so you've all seen one. It was almost the very first time for me also that I saw one. I'm researching these Bhaṭṭāraka traditions in Western India. I mostly visit Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. All the traditions there have now discontinued. It's only here in Karnataka, a few places in Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu that these are still, the seats are still going on with this Guru Shishya Parampara. The aspect of Jaina Dharma that I am bringing to the stage is ritual and devotion, apart from all the other aspects which we've already heard about. I have specific motivations to highlight this subject. I'm presenting it here as if my case of the Bhaṭṭārakas is a case study within the study of Jaina ritual. Actually, of course, the truth is the other way around, that I started doing historical research on Bhaṭṭārakas, and that certain findings there led me to these broader reflections on Jaina ritual and Jaina devotion. The reason why I find it necessary to highlight this explicitly is because it's one aspect of Jainism that is very often left out, specifically of Western representations of Jainism. And at a few times, at least in the presentation, I'll be explicitly showing that myself being a Westerner, when I started studying Jainism, here's a few moments of surprises that I was up to. And in that sense, what I've come to so far, what I will be presenting, what I will be trying to argument, is that ritual and devotion in Jainism, in the vocabulary of a discourse, of a conversation I was having with a student here, I present it as a kind of a technology of the self, as a means to acquire a certain type of knowledge about one's own tradition, which is not reducible to other ways of learning, theoretical ways of learning about your tradition more specifically. All of that being said, I will be showing you some findings of my fieldwork, but I will be starting out with a few scriptural references, which should, at least as an introduction, show the importance of bhakti, of devotion, and of ritual in Jainism. And there's a few types of bhakti. The first one, the best documented one, so to say, is of course bhakti to the liberated Tirthankaras or the Jinas. And here's an example, notably from Bhaṭṭārakas Mūlacārya, which is a text specifically outlining the behavior of ascetics, which reads, previously acquired karma can be or is destroyed by bhakti to the excellent jinas. So practicing bhakti can actually destroy one's karma. Just a few very short quotations. Acharya bhakti, that is devotion towards one's ascetic teacher or towards the leader of an ascetic lineage. Acharya bhakti causes, interesting here, the influx, ashrava, of the Tirthankara nama karma. People who know more about karma theory might be as surprised by this as I was, or not. It was quite a surprise to me, but here it is says that Acharya bhakti can actually mean that you will reach the position of a Tirthankara in any future birth. From the Tadvart Sutra, I'm sorry, I don't have the shloka number here. Guru bhakti then, devotion towards your teacher. And this here comes from the Acharya bhakti, which is attributed at least to Kundakunda Acharya. May the praise of your multitude of virtues performed by this ignorant one, accompanied with Guru Bhakti, grant me perfect knowledge. So here it is stated that praising one's virtues, in Hindi that would be Gunnagan, can actually grant perfect knowledge, which means liberating knowledge. So it can lead to liberation. We've had Acharya Bhakti, Jina Bhakti, Guru Bhakti. In this next citation here, from the Avashaka Niryukti, you see the whole series of, let's say, suitable objects for devotion and veneration. Progressing on the path towards liberation is done by bhakti of jina images, mendicant lineages, groups and congregations, bhakti of acharyas, the jina's teachings, and the other scriptures, just as by striving with asceticism and equanimity. Now, this is no small statement. This says that bhakti is actually an equal means to reach liberation as tapas and as samyam, asceticism and equanimity. So it proposes in a way like 3 ways to reach liberation, and bhakti is no less than the others. This is just a short introduction, but I was very happy to be able to add another reference just from yesterday's conference. It's less of a scriptural reference, but in my field for sure he is a big authority. Bhaṭṭārakji in his lecture or pravachan here said that samvarana, which is more typically translated as the stoppage of the influx of karma, consists of stuti, bhakti, compassion, anukampa, and charity. So stuti, veneration, bhakti can actually stop the influx of new karma. So these short citations just to show that the scriptures absolutely do place bhakti as a very, very central element of the moksha marga, of the way to reach liberation. In that sense, it would seem already that ritual and devotion are certainly central elements of Jaina Dharma, both soteriologically and epistemologically. Through ritual, you develop knowledge, and this knowledge can help you reach liberation. However, contrast this to this citation from Jacobi, one of the founders of the study of Jainism in the West. What does he write about bhakti and ritual? I believe that this worship, ritual devotion, had nothing to do with original Buddhism or Jainism, that it did not originate with the monks, but with the lay community, when the religious development of India found in bhakti the supreme means of salvation. So contrary to the earlier statements which put bhakti right there in the center of Jainism's soteriology, here it is stated that is not only a later development, that does not belong to original Jainism, but that is a typical lay phenomenon which has nothing to do with the ascetic practices. There's a big contrast between both. I won't go deeply into it, but these kinds of Western perspectives on ritual, which continue up to today, and which is why I was so surprised when I started to learn about Jaina rituals, have a long history, a long colonial and even a long pre-colonial history also. And this illustration can tell us a lot about it. There's many similar illustrations of how Westerners, and this would be a pre-colonial example, perceived Jaina, or more broadly Indian temple life when they first came across it. You see the people worshipping this strange object. I've used this chitra before when teaching in class at the university, and I think at that point I asked the students, have you ever seen something similar like this in an Indian temple? So this is a Western representation, pre-colonial representation of an Indian temple. I suppose it must be some wild fantasy of a Shiva Linga. Actually, around Nagpur now, I started seeing Kshetrapal images which look a lot like it, but I'm sure that's not where the inspiration for it came. But I mean, this is clearly typical of a very dismissive European understanding of what ritual is all about. There's a few elements of it which are particularly meaningful to understand where this all came from, this preconception of ritual being something which was very much to be discarded and which was not to be praised itself. There's an element here, this here. I don't know if you can all see that sufficiently, but that's what we call in Dutch a sater. And I don't know what that translates to in English. Is that just sater? You see the goat legs, he's playing the pan flute. So this is a very typical biblical image of what heathen religions, what false worship is about. So, I mean, these kinds of illustrations were probably made by people who never came to India, but who were reading the traveler reports, the missionaries' reports, the merchants' reports, and just with wild fantasy, making some drawings of it. And you can see that this Christian mythology, this Christian biblical stereotypes came into their understandings and representations of Indian temple life. The second example is not only Indian, but it has to do with offering, with human offerings, with false beliefs, with idolatry, and with empty ritual which has no function whatsoever. So this is the kind of background which Europeans started looking at Indian ritual. Now, when I started out as describing ritual and devotion as central elements, what I tried to bring here is a kind of a reappraisal. Then, if it is not just all of those biblical stereotypes, what is actually the value of it, both soteriologically and epistemologically? I'm dealing with a few further stereotypes, not necessarily very explicitly here, but the idea of a guru in the West needs some reconsideration, maybe. And Guru Bhakti would typically be something, it's not rational, it's blind faith, you are blindly devoting yourself to someone, so it is to be dismissed. I'm also reconsidering the concept of the guru. What is a guru? What is his function? What does he do for his pupil? And also sadhus. What is a sadhu? Bhaṭṭārakas Swamiji mentioned a certain Digambara Muni being present in Mudbidri right now, and this is the one. Chinmay Sagar Jangalwala Baba Maharaj. Aapne darshan kiya hai kal? I actually I had this picture first, but after hearing that this Maharaj was actually present very closely, I copy-pasted this one. There's something, the similarity between both, however, is very big. Both of them are about to disappear into the jungle, and they just look over their shoulder, a last one, and extend their blessings on us. So, I mean, this is a kind of a stereotype about sadhus also. Sadhus, these nirgranta munis, which are not only bookless but also bondless. The idea of a sadhu is that they have no bonds in the sense of, that's how I typically understand it, they have no mental impurities, they have no mental knots in their consciousness. They also have no bonds with the lay community. They're supposed to keep traveling and be completely without any bonds, any responsibilities. The opposite is quite true at the same time. When you see munis, many of these people today, and I'm sure in the past also, have big responsibilities, have a lot of influence over the lay society. They are involved in institutions. They are involved in huge Jirnodar reconstruction projects of temples, etc. So they're actually very, very strongly related to the Jai community as well. So in that sense, the ideal of a sadhu, I mean, it might be there, but there's a lot more in the background working as well. And coming to my type of Digambara ascetics, like you've seen one here just yesterday, the Bhaṭṭārakas and Bhaṭṭāraka Bhakti. Now, Bhaṭṭāraka Bhakti, that's a term which I'm just minting myself now. This mathematical formulation here, people who know about Digambara Jainism today will know what this stands for. Two main branches in Digambara Jainism, Therapant and Bispant. And it's the Bispants only which support the Bhaṭṭārakas. The Therapantis are actually very much against the Bhaṭṭārakas because they don't represent the ideal of a Nirgrant ascetic. So most of what I'm presenting here comes from a Bispant perspective. I want to work, I'm due to work more on this opposition itself, but I'm not dealing with it here actually. However, Bhaṭṭāraka Bhakti surely existed in my region in Western India just as much as this first short example would show a manuscript illustration which shows lay people maybe listening also, like we were yesterday, to the pravachan of the Bhaṭṭāraka, but they are definitely venerating this clotted Digambara ascetic. Very shortly, I've already reported on this elsewhere, but I'm showing you some new findings of my fieldwork trip this year, some of the manuscript material which I'm working with, for example. A first source of my research which shows the extent of the devotion which existed to these Bhaṭṭārakas in Western India in my period, 13th to say 18th, 19th century. These Bhaṭṭāraka pujas, Digambara puja, Jaina puja, typically Ashtadravya puja, 8 types of materials are being worshipped, typically in worship of a jina image. Here also, today also towards the Munis, but here to the Bhaṭṭārakas. These are the 8 types of substances, and these are some manuscripts, in this case from Jaipur. If you care to read along with me, this one says, Atta Bhaṭṭāraka Shri Bhaṭṭārak Ji Shri Mahendra Kirti Ji Ka Paduka Puja Likyate. I don't know if you share my love for manuscripts, but if you work with manuscripts, I mean, that's why I like showing them also. What it says is, now I am writing this puja, this 8-fold puja of a Bhaṭṭāraka. A bit further in the text is a passage which will be very, very familiar to whoever has read Jaina or at least Digambara puja text. It says, and this is an invocation of probably the deceased Bhaṭṭāraka before we start actually worshipping him. It says, Om Hrim Shri Paramacharitra Patra Shri Guru Charana Yug Kamala Kamala Atra Avatara Sambho Shat Ahvanam Atra Tishtata Stapanam. So every single Digambara puja has these kinds of mantras and this specific formulation to establish the object of veneration before one's mental eye, before one's dravyas also. Here it is directed at Bhaṭṭārakas, otherwise it would be at jinas, etc. A bit further, just the part in yellow, it says Jalam Nirvapamiti Swaha, which is the sound you would be hearing in every Jain temple. The moment that these substances are offered, people say Swaha, and in this case it's water which is being offered. Jalam Nirvapamiti Swaha. So this is the type of manuscript material which I work with, which shows the devotion of the Bhaṭṭārakas, and there's a more typical understanding of Bhaṭṭārakas in that late medieval period as having been a kind of protectors of Jainism at a period, and it's always connected to the Muslim rule of India, very inauspicious time for Jainism. And for that reason, those naked munis who were no longer allowed to roam nakedly in the streets, they started wearing clothing, and they had the function of protecting Digambara Jainism in this very inauspicious period. That's the main understanding of Bhaṭṭārakas, and that makes them sound like a kind of a clerics, not ascetics in their own right. So I was very surprised when seeing, for example, these kinds of texts, that they were actually very charismatic and venerable ascetics in their own right as well at that time. So that's why within my research these are important sources. Bhaṭṭāraka Gitas, just very shortly, these are vernacular song texts. I had already found many of them which would be meant to welcome the Bhaṭṭārakas when they visited villages or towns. These here are Gitas, songs which celebrate the Pattabhishek, the establishing of a new Bhaṭṭāraka on the Pat, and at the same time they give us a lot of historical information also. And lastly, and here I'm taking you back into the field, I'm also serving chatris, samadhi stalls, so cenotaphs, funerary monuments erased in honor of these Bhaṭṭārakas. Here's a beautiful example from Karanja in northern Maharashtra. Inside these chatris, or here they're actually called mandirs, you would find the padukas, which were already referred to in those texts, the footprint images of the Bhaṭṭārakas, and this here is a specifically interesting place in the sense that it is one out of only 2 places which I've seen so far next to Surat where there's actually still an active worship of these Bhaṭṭāraka padukas. At other places these chatris are still there, if at least they haven't been demolished since, but nobody or very little people actually visit them and worship them. So Karanja and Surat are these 2 places where every year, typically at the day that this Bhaṭṭāraka deceased, there's still being an Ashtadravya puja, arti being offered for the Bhaṭṭāraka, etc.
You asked me to remind you for
Thank
20
you very
minutes.
much. Yeah, thank you. What I also had to remind myself about is that very soon there will be pictures of naked munis coming up, so in case that people have a problem with that, they will be. This is one of the sites, that's the site, same site in Karanja. And if I go across this a bit,